Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to you all. I hope you guys are doing very well today and you're ready to kickstart your day with myself, Wtm, only on PTV World this morning. Today we have a wonderful show lined up for you, and this is actually one that we have been trying to get this guest on the show for I think a good 4 to 5 years since we started, because I had a list of all the people I wanted to interview and I thought would be really great for all the world also to see as well, and kind of have that interaction on a more social, more relaxed kind of setting. And this is what this show is all about. It's about providing you guys the counter narrative or a more balanced view of what's happening within Pakistan and around the world. But today we are focusing on Islam and the West. This is something that is a huge conversation, and it has a direct impact on how we are treated and the policies that our government then kind of adopts, and it has those repercussions within Pakistan. What we have been seeing is a rise of right-wing and extreme thought, not just within Pakistan as well, which we are fighting, and we know what the situation is here, but we hear all these horror stories from Europe or from America. And actually what we've seen is that Austria recently shut down 7 mosques. They sent out 60 imams. We've seen that in Hungary, Poland, France, Netherlands and UK, there are new right-wing political movements that have been integrated into mainstream politics because they have kind of taken the side with the mainstream conservatives. In Hungary you have Viktor Orban, part of the Fidesz party. He is currently doing that. In France you have Marine Le Pen, who won 21% of the vote in France. She's a radical right-wing as well. In Poland you see the rise of national radical camp, national movements, and the Law and Justice Party, which is also shifting the political landscape within there. And within Netherlands, you see Geert Wilders, who is part of the Party for Freedom, and he came joint second in the last election. So when we talk about this is extremism and all these unrest within society. Every nation is facing that. But what is happening with Islam? Because it gets a bad reputation. There's all this negative stuff attached to it. So we've been joined by some wonderful guests in the studio. I'm so excited and slightly nervous to introduce them. And we will be talking about the latest book that is part of the 4-volume series. And we have been joined, I'm going to do the introduction, then tell you who it is. He is a world-renowned anthropologist. He's an Islamic scholar. He is an author, a filmmaker, and he's a former ambassador. Currently, he is the Ibn Khaldun Chair at American University in Washington, D.C., and in Pakistan to promote the latest in his fourth volume in his series called Journey into Europe. We have been joined by Professor Akbar Ahmed. Assalamu alaikum, good morning.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that warm and beautiful introduction.
Thank you, and there was more, and you're also here to see your family too. You're not here just to work
Yes,
as well,
absolutely.
and we're going to find out everything about that as well. Thank you, it's a pleasure to have you here. Besides Professor Akbar Ahmed, we have been joined by Dr. Amine Ahmed Hoti. She is the senior researcher for Journey into Europe. Assalamu alaikum, good morning.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. And besides Dr. Amine Ahmed Hoti, we have been joined by Mohammed Taha Vakar. He is our Naat Khwan today as well. Assalamu alaikum. Kaise hain aap? Zabardast. And so actually we're going to get this show started with Mohammed Taha. Then we're going to show you a little trailer for Journey into Europe and work that Professor Akbar Ahmed has been doing, and then we'll start our conversation. So Mohammed Taha, please, if you could.
तेरी आँखें तेरी जुल्फ़ें तेरा शाना देखूं तेरी आँखें तेरी जुल्फ़ें तेरा शाना देखूं बाखुदा कदमों में सरकार के पाया जाता तेरी आँखें तेरी जुल्फ़ें तेरा शाना देखूं लोग सारे तो तेरे शहर के दीवाने हैं लोग सारे तो तेरे शहर के दीवाने हैं मेरी ख्वाहिशें हैं कि मैं तेरा ज़माना देखूं तेरी आँखें तेरी जुल्फ़ें तेरा शाना देखूं चश्मे अतर को खुदाया वो बसीरतें दे दे चश्मे अतर को खुदाया वो बसीरतें दे दे किबला रूहो के मोहम्मद को रोज़ाना देखूं तेरी आँखें तेरी जुल्फ़ें तेरा शाना देखूं.
Okay, and now what we are going to do, we're going to share the trailer.
This British man has to pay the price.
A terrorist incident.
Are we seeing a clash of civilizations?
Islam is incompatible with all Western civilization.
The war has started. People just need to wake up and pick a side.
Xenophobic tidal wave that's sweeping across Europe currently.
Anybody who isn't a Muslim has never been to a mosque. They're not places that other people would go to.
I was an award-winning TV presenter, like a popular icon, and suddenly I was accused of being a supporter of terrorism.
Many are saying Islam and European identity are incompatible. Others disagree.
There are descriptions of Andalusia as a paradise.
Muslims are part of Europe.
I'm reducing their identity to their religion, which is, I think, totally wrong.
We are Europeans. There is a monopoly of what is culture, what religion.
One creator, one God, three names. Every one of us are his creation.
Wonderful. So that was a trailer into the conversation now that we are going to have with Professor Akbar Ahmed and Dr. Amne Hoti as well. So now, you started this. This is the 4th volume in your series. And so why did you decide that something needs to be done and a narrative needs to be provided about a journey into Europe and Islam's relationship with the West?
Maha, because after 9/11, Islam became a very controversial, discussed, misunderstood religion in the West and soon globally. And I really felt that every Muslim, I was a professor on campus, but every Muslim in his or her capacity had to be involved in trying to create bridges, in trying to explain the religion, the culture, and make friends for Islam. Or I felt that the increasing Islamophobia, which I was seeing, increasing in front of my eyes, would become worse, and there would be no barriers, and who would suffer would be the ordinary woman going to shopping, wearing a veil or a hijab, at the mosque, the local mosque, and the attacks on them, they were infrequent at first, but they would become worse and worse and worse. So I really felt I had to throw myself in, which I did. And I appeared a lot in the media. I was giving lectures, think tanks, White House, Pentagon, everywhere, wherever I could make it. But I really felt that it was time to do very thorough research based in extended field work. To go to the field, take notes, take interviews, and then within a theoretical frame, answer certain questions. And I conceived of 4 projects. It was a quartet. It took me some 16 to 17 years. I've been working on this for a long time, and accompanied by a brilliant team, of which Dr. Hoti, I'm very proud to say, she's my daughter, but she's such a great academic and researcher. She was always there in the field with me in all these projects, and wherever she was, with all the difficulties that you have leading a normal life. She's the mother of several children, but she would be there with me on this, understanding the importance of ilm and knowledge, especially looking after the women's side of the research. So the first project was the Muslim world looking at the West.
Right.
So we traveled throughout the Muslim world. The second was the West looking at the Muslim world. The third was the focus was on tribal societies.
Right.
So from Morocco right through North Africa, Middle East into the Caucasus Mountains. 40 case studies.
Amazing.
And the final one was Journey into Europe, which took me about 4 years. And we traveled the length and breadth of Europe. The central question for Europe was exactly what you said in your introduction, issues of terrorism, immigration, anti-Islamophobia sentiments, the rise of the right wing, and some of these trends that you hinted at, mosques being closed, imams being expelled. We were seeing all this happening, and we were seeing ek tufan aa raha hai, with a storm coming. What do we need to do about it? So at the end of the book, we have lots and lots of very good, solid suggestions and recommendations.
And that's what I wanted to ask you, because when you did start this and you were saying you wanted to see, how the rise of Islamophobia was happening, what was, you noticed the attitudes changing. And over the last, 18 years or whatnot, 16, 17 years, as I just mentioned in my introduction, we have seen that happen. Exactly, that's happened with all those examples that I've given. I didn't even break down the examples, because what you hear in the media all the time is that Muslim terrorist, like we had the attacks in France and you have the attacks in America, but it's always the Muslim terrorist. So when you see that your predictions and what you were seeing is happening, how has the reception been for each way of the stages of every time you've released one of the books?
It's very interesting, this question, Ma, because we've also been observing our own books coming out and the reactions to them. So this book, for example, it's got excellent reviews in the top journals and papers, the New York Times, the American Academy of Religion, a very famous professor who writes on Islam, Christian professor. He called it a masterpiece. Now that's a very strong statement for any book. So we got very positive, but also from the Islamophobes, people whose profession it is to attack Islam, I've got very negative comments and criticism, because they say Islam is a useless religion, it's not capable of producing anything worthwhile. And Akbar Ahmed basically concocts, he makes up things, he's telling lies that there was no Andalusia, there was no glory of Andalusia. Muslims are always, barbarians and marauders. You mentioned Geert Wilders, for example. He calls Muslims a backward culture of barbarity. So the right wing would respond in that way. And I'm prepared for that.
Okay. So, and let me move on to Dr. Aminé. You were the senior researcher, and you were obviously, and also as Professor Akbar Ahmed has just mentioned, that you provided also the insight of the female perspective. What were you seeing over the course of your research with every different angle that you've approached with every book? Because, you've Islam to the West, and then vice versa, then the tribal areas, and now, the final journey into Europe. What have you seen?
Thank you very much, Maha. This is a very good question. First of all, the team of Professor Akbar Ahmed was a very big team. It consisted of American students, it consisted of Pakistani students, and so it was very global, and yet it was very academic. But the idea was that it would reach out to the everyday person, so taking complex ideas and making them accessible to the everyday person. And we have some of the students going on now to do their PhD and work on these projects. So it's been a very ambitious project, reaching out to the Muslim world and really covering the whole of the Muslim world, covering America. So for the first time you have a Pakistani professor, and all Pakistani, your listeners would be very proud to hear that for the first time here was a Pakistani scholar at a very international level with quality research, speaking and analyzing the West. Because often it's the other way around. It's Western scholars who come to Pakistan and to Muslim countries and say, we think this and that, and this is how we analyze society. So here you had the reverse, and that was in itself a big step forward. And that's what we need to encourage with our young people, bring them out as scholars, as thinkers, in the footsteps of Professor Akbar Ahmed, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, Quaid-e-Azam, all these thinkers and scholars and men of action who are thinking but also bringing ideas forward. And it's been a fascinating journey for me personally, because I learned a lot from this project. I mean, it's covered a huge amount of the world, and there's so much more to learn, but the key takeaways are the bridge building. I was fascinated by studying Andalusia, Al-Andalus, a period of 800 years, where Muslims ruled, but where Christians and Jews and Muslims and people of all faith lived in relative harmony. And the emphasis was on creativity, on knowledge, on producing a culture which was, you know, wonderful for everybody and positive for everybody.
Right. Okay, so now, but when you were, you know, when you were learning all these things, and, you know, because as, you know, Professor Akbar has also mentioned that you gave a unique side because it was a female, you know, it was a female senior researcher. And in the West, there's also this kind of misconception that women don't have education. And even within, you know, Islamic countries, we don't know this element of it. So working also alongside someone who is a brilliant mind, but also your father, how was that experience? You know, was it, because we don't tend to see that happen that often.
That's a very good question. It wasn't easy working with my father because he says the closer you're related to me, the more I expect of you.
Oh gosh,
so it was very rigorous, to be honest. And so we had to wake up really early. You know, there was personal interaction, there was father-daughter interaction, but also there was the teacher, student, scholar, you know, person who's learning. And of course, it's very difficult for a woman from our culture to leave home, leave family for large periods of time. The project was nearly 4 years, but I had to leave Pakistan and go to different countries, sometimes with my child. And it wasn't easy. There was one moment where my child fell from the table and cut herself very badly. So at that point, my dad said, just pack up and leave. I want all of you to go back to Pakistan home. So that, you know, you're safe, because the journey was very rigorous. We had to pack up three days in each city across Europe. So it wasn't an easy, it wasn't an easy research, but very fruitful.
Wonderful.
And of course, women have many challenges of their own, but having a child with me and being a woman that allowed me to connect with other women in the field, and that allowed them to open up. So maybe the male researchers such as Frankie Martin or Harrison wouldn't have been able to connect with them because they didn't have children, but with me being a woman and a Muslim woman in the field with a child, that was very helpful. So that allowed those bonds to form.
And Maha, I do want to make this point that Amne was there purely on merit. She may be my daughter, but she's a brilliant researcher. She's a PhD from Cambridge University. So she's got the best credentials. And she was there on a voluntary basis. She was not paid for this. She said, I'll volunteer this because I understand how important it is for Muslims. And you know, there's Pakistani community people don't understand. There are millions of Pakistanis. In England, there'll be, I think, almost 1 million. In the United States, there would be almost 1 million or over. So in the West, there are millions of Pakistanis, some of them doing very well, some of them facing problems. So Amne was very keen to participate, just to contribute, so both as my daughter and as an anthropologist with high credentials and credibility. So I was always very grateful. But she's right, when I'm in the field, then I am very driven, and I want my team to have very high standards. And you know, I've been serving in the past in the tribal areas, Balochistan, so we're used to driving ourselves to maintain a high standard of administration. And I must say, my entire team, including Amne, kept up with that, regardless of the fact that we had Anna, her daughter, with us, but she kept up that pace and never once tried to make excuses or back out. She was always there, doing her interviews and sacrificing everything for the sake of this project.
And that's wonderful. And I think, you know, you should have behind the scenes footage as well. You should do a film like that, because I think people need to see this empowered side of Islam as well, and especially a female. But now, Professor Akbar, I want to bring it back to the actual book, because like you mentioned, there's a lot of solutions in there, and obviously people are supposed to go and read it themselves and, you know, discover the beauty of it. But there are key elements within the brief which I feel like is important, and you know, we can discuss that. So you know, within that you've mentioned that Islam and the European history and civilization, as you mentioned, Andalusia, and some people dispute that the fact that it existed. Why do you think that this kind of education of kind of the more peaceful and the more glorious elements of Islam are not being incorporated into history books within the West?
Maha, you have two choices. Right now, you pointed out people like Viktor Orban from Hungary, you pointed out Geert Wilders, you pointed out Le Pen. They're taking a line which means confrontation, conflict, violence in the future, if you follow that line. You have to have an alternative, because if you don't, then the minorities in Europe have no place. Because their argument is you don't belong here. So the thesis is that Muslims have not belonged to Europe, they have not contributed to Europe, and basically they should pack up and go home. Now, so my aim was to constantly, through field research, interviews of Europeans, to find solutions to that thesis, an antithesis if you like. And therefore I was constantly looking for bonds, for cultural bridges, and it was incredible what we found. Take one example. Now Allama Iqbal, we love him and we revere him in Pakistan. But how many people know that Iqbal has very strong links with Europe? Iqbal in Cambridge, Iqbal in Germany, Iqbal in Spain, Iqbal in Bosnia. Everywhere we went, we found evidence of Iqbal. It was incredibly inspiring. We were in the mayor's office in Cordoba, and we were chatting away. Mayor was sitting there, I was sitting on his right, and Amne, Dr. Hoti, was sitting right in front of me. And she started making signs, and I said maybe she's feeling hot, or maybe it's something, she needs something. But then she was pointing right behind me. So I then paused for a moment, and then there was television and media, and I looked behind me, and there was Iqbal's poem Masjid-e-Cordoba in Urdu, in a beautiful, lovely presentation of calligraphy from Lahore. And the mayor didn't know this. So after the interview, we pointed that out, and he was amazed that Iqbal, who visited Cordoba, wrote this poem, which was then presented to the city of Cordoba, and he's being honored. So, and of course there's a street called Iqbal named after him. So many, many ways where we can connect to show what Muslims contributed in philosophy, humanity, mathematics, science, religion. There was a time when the ruler of Cordoba had a Jewish prime minister, chief minister. His ambassador to the courts of Europe was an archbishop, a Catholic bishop. So it was that sense of living together which the Spanish call la convivencia, coexistence. So an alternative to what is happening in Europe has to be found. If that is a European problem, you have to have a European solution. And we believed after this research that we have it in a place like Andalusia. And it's not restricted to Muslims. The Christian kings in Italy, Sicily at that time, in the 12th century, 13th century, were doing exactly the same with their minorities.
Amazing.
Inclusiveness.
Okay, this is so fascinating, and really, if you are interested in this, you guys really should check this out, because I have also seen a journey into Europe, and it is extremely fascinating. You learn a lot of things. But now, I want to talk about the West a little bit more, and then I want to bring it back to Pakistan as well. But, right now we are seeing, there's a lot of conflict zones, and that is creating a lot of refugees. That's creating a bit of a crisis. Now, what we're seeing is that people are jumping on that and portraying it in a very negative element. Why do you think that everything, like the migration or refugees or terrorism, why is it continuously being linked to Islam? I mean, because we know that, for example, and I'm sorry for all our American viewers out there, but you have these shootings or these attacks, which are terrorism, but once they become an American Caucasian, it's a mental health issue. And that's the type of news that we're getting here. You're seeing a very obvious kind of discrimination
of explanation of the event. No, you're right, Ma, and a lot of people in America have picked this up, non-Muslims, American commentators, and in the West, in England and so on, that any time a Muslim does anything, you say Islam is the cause. If someone else does it, they say mental health, and they explain it that way. No, but again, we were very, very academic and neutral, analytical and rigorous in our research. So we have to admit, Maha, that there have been many, many acts of violence, of terrorism. Belgium, France, England, Muslims are involved in them. You can't make an excuse and say that's not happening. Absolutely. Now, once you acknowledge that, then you have to do the connecting of the dots. You see that it's happening there, you have incidents, the right wing immediately picks that up and says, look, basically Muslims are violent, all Muslims are violent. From one, they'll make it all Muslims. And therefore, the prejudice then envelopes the society, that community. So whether you like it or not, if someone looks at you, or you're a student at school, students are being bullied simply because they have a Muslim name, you're then typecast as a Muslim, and Muslim equals terrorism and violence. There has to be a counter, and it has to come from the Muslim community.
Okay.
I keep saying this, that Muslims must be much more active. Every Muslim must be an ambassador. They must reach out, explain what's going on, and participate. Talk to the Jewish community, the Christian community, the Catholic community, the atheist community, because they're living in a society. They cannot be isolated. If they're isolated, they're being defined by others. They must define themselves.
Absolutely. And on that note, we are going to go for a short break. And when you come back, we're going to continue our conversation. Do stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. And before the break, we were in an excellent conversation with Professor Akbar Ahmed, who we finally managed to get on the show. And besides Professor Akbar Ahmed, we have been joined by Dr. Amine Ahmed Hoti. And now we've been joined by Sayyid Zulfikar Ali Gilani, who is our Naat Khwan. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And also, before we go back to our conversation, we are going to get Sayyid Zulfikar to perform a naat for us as well before we go. Thank you.
خواب میں روزائے سرکار نظر آیا ہے میرے گھر آج میرا چاند اتر آیا ہے رحم اے سید ذیشان کہ تیرے در کا فقیر رحم اے سید ذیشان کہ تیرے در کا فقیر تیرے دربار میں بادیدائے تر آیا ہے لامکان شاہ کے لیے اجنبی ماحول तमाशा के लिए अजनबी माहौल नहीं कि ये मेहमान अजीज अपने ही घर आया है। मेरे घर आज मेरा चांद उतर आया है। ख्वाब मेरा
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Very nice. Wow, that's excellent. Okay, so now getting back to the conversation, I feel like I'm in a zone now. But before the break, Professor Akbar, you mentioned about the association that we're getting, you know, in the West. Dr. Amine, because you are based in Pakistan, are you seeing that we have the similar prejudice towards the West that they have towards the Muslim world?
That's an interesting question, Maha. There is definitely ideas or perceptions about the other on both sides. And our work through this project has been to act like a bridge through scholarship and knowledge, through connecting the dots. For example, when you talk about Al-Andalus, a period when there was this sense of connection, a sense of knowledge based in this very idea of the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And also the Quran Sharif. The Quran is a beautiful book. Again, that's based in knowledge and learning and thinking and scholarship. So those ideas were connecting. But you're right that there is this perception of the other. So there is a perception of the West over here, which is largely, you know, not fully based, in fact, until you go there and suddenly you realize, you know, there are challenges, but there's also difficulties.
Okay.
And so...
Isme Maha, what Amne has raised is very important, because we found that some of the most inspiring leaders in the West were committed to reaching out to Muslims.
Okay.
This is what we may use the word interfaith, that they wanted to embrace in a good way, leaving you alone with your own integrity and culture, but reaching out to you. For example, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, we interviewed him,
Yes.
Dr. Rowan Williams. We interviewed the former Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom, the Grand Mufti of Bosnia, a very famous Muslim scholar, Mustafa Cheric, and the present Grand Mufti. So all these great figures were very inspiring. And our hope is that Europe is able to learn from its own wise people, because that is a critical issue. The second point related to this discussion of minorities, Maha, is, and I hope your Pakistani listeners and viewers are going to take this seriously, in the West, for someone like me, I'm constantly talking in churches and mosques and synagogues all the time. I'm out there. One of the first questions I get, because I'm saying Muslims are under pressure, Muslims are misunderstood, one of the first questions I get is, how are you treating your minorities? And the social media and through the internet and so on, everyone knows what's going on. You can't conceal these things.
Absolutely.
They give example, this is what you did in a church, this is what you did, this is what you're doing to your own kids. In Peshawar, we killed 150 people with so many children being killed. This is what you're doing to your minorities, Muslim minorities in Quetta and so on. So they give these examples. That makes the argument for someone like me, Maha, very, very difficult. We have to understand we are living in a world which is interconnected. So if you're being hurt abroad and you're hurting others here, you cannot say that I have nothing to do with them.
Absolutely.
We are interconnected, so we must understand that, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, had mentioned, he said the whole body is like, well, the ummah is like one body. So if it's paining here, the whole body is going to be paining.
Absolutely.
One finger means the whole body is paining. That awareness, I don't think, is as developed as I would like it here.
Okay.
We seem to be oblivious to that.
Okay, that's a very interesting. Yes, Dr.
And I'd like to add, in that line, I have the privilege of undertaking this book called The Religions of Pakistan.
Okay.
And in that I'm discovering this, it's a journey, but I've been privileged to interview Muslims, to interview people of different faiths in Pakistan and different communities. And I'm really discovering a lot of friends and a lot of good people who are really patriotic to Pakistan. For example, I spoke to a Sikh leader recently, and he said for him, Pakistan is so sacred. Every corner of Pakistan is precious and sacred to him because their founder, Guru Nanak, was born in Pakistan. So they want to protect Pakistan with their life. And I spoke to a Buddhist who said, you know, before anything happens to Pakistan, hamara jaan hazir hai. So they were so patriotic, but we haven't heard these voices.
No, you're right.
And through this research and through this book that I'm undercarrying, I'm able to engage and hear the voices, the mosaic of voices. And that's what I'd like to, you know, sort of bring out, inshallah.
And Amne researched Bitcha, the great Sufi saint of Sindh, but the Sufi saint of all of South Asia. And through her research, I'm being introduced to this great Bitcha, and I really think all of Pakistanis need to discover and rediscover a man of that stature who even is beyond someone like Shakespeare in his wisdom and his brilliance.
Amazing. We don't know these things. So with that, we're going to go for a short break, and when you come back, we're going to get our final words from our guests, and we're going to get one more performance from Sayyid Zulfikar as well. Do stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. And as you know, is the nature of our show, when we're having a great conversation, we always run out of time. So we are in the last stretch of the show. But I want to ask, there are three questions I feel like I want to ask. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Amine. Within Pakistan, because you will be continuing the work, and you know your work is mainly based here, doing a lot of research, and you've been on our show multiple times talking about, you know, all-inclusive and interfaith harmony, etc. How do you see the reception of the book within Pakistan, and what do you hope to achieve with it here?
Thank you, Maha. It's been a very positive journey for the book. It's not out yet. OUP will be publishing it next month.
Okay.
But already it's been launched by the Council of Islamic Ideology.
That's what I meant, exactly.
And the Council of Islamic Ideology, as you know, has been traditionally known to be very conservative, ultra-orthodox. Yes. And yet there were scholars, senior scholars and thinkers and religious people under the leadership of Dr. Qibla Ayaz, who's the new scholar, thinker, and he's leading the council, and he was able to bring in people of different thoughts. So we had the liberals, we had people who were more conservative, and here they were discussing these important themes.
Right.
Professor Akbar Ahmed gave a talk there, which was very well received, and it was very warmly received by the Pakistanis, intellectuals, and also I think there's a lot of hope.
Excellent.
In these sort of events and in these sort of bridge building ideas.
Yeah. Excellent, because that's it. I was reading the review from the launch. Yes. That's what I keep mixing. So I get insights into things, and I'm sorry, guys, like I kind of mixed that up. But now, Professor Ahmed, you know, you've done this research. You know, you've dedicated a lot of time and effort to look at, you reverse the roles and see what is the situation for Islam, and then as a result for Muslims. First of all, I'd like to ask you, What is the role of the Muslims now, especially once once there is this kind of actual research out there highlighting the different elements of Islam in the West? What would you hope for them to now start practicing?
For them, Maha, especially the young, because the elder generation, I may just give them up because I don't think they're capable of responding in that way. They're still out of this world, as it were. The young have to begin to respond in a very different and a very dynamic way, and they're capable of it. You have a whole new young generation coming up in the Muslim world, both in the West and over here. They must begin to focus on responding to ideas of the image of Islam as a violent religion, the treatment of women that leaves a lot to be desired. The young have to change that. The treatment of minorities. Islam gives perhaps more rights and is more inclusive than any other faith, and yet you see this very sad tradition we have throughout the Muslim world of treating minorities in a quite disgraceful manner. That is the treatment of the other.
Yes.
And finally, the rediscovery of Islam's most dynamic features, which means the emphasis on knowledge, ilm, the emphasis on the inner self, the sense of purity, the sense of spirituality. These are great traditions we have. As I mentioned, Amne is studying Britcha from the Sindh. These are great inheritance, great legacy that we have. We need to begin to rediscover it, especially the young generation, because they're going to be facing a world which at this moment is very hostile.
Yes.
And at this moment it can be very confusing to be young, because they're seeing a religion which is being hammered from the East and the West, and they're saying, how do we move ahead? A lot of youngsters are feeling very insecure and very unsure. So to be able to survive this era, which we may or may not be able to see in the next couple of decades, they have to have the tools, the kit, and they have to be armed. And I believe that this is what knowledge, this is what reading material like this will help them do. It will help them chart the future with confidence and with iman, because ultimately it's all a question of faith, and having that faith and knowing that inshallah they will get through it.
Absolutely. And and that's the thing, this is why we're so lucky in the 21st century, and with the whole technology advancing so much, that we do have access to these materials now. Whereas when we were maybe younger, it was harder to kind of find people that you can connect to, or find that moderate, reasonable voice. But also, and finally, Professor Ahmed, I'd like to ask you, what do you hope, and do you see a positive outcome for Islam in Europe, or what is basically the state of the world? What do you think of it?
Very briefly,
yes.
I believe in the West, in Europe especially, we are at the crossroads.
Okay.
A lot will depend. If we go one direction, we are in trouble. If we go the other direction, which we hope we do, I've got lots of material, I've got lots of very prominent Europeans wanting convivencia, wanting dialogue. If that works, then I think we'll come through it. And Europe has to become a beacon of civilization, as it was many times in the past. America has to be a beacon of Western civilization, and that will happen only if the minorities are integrated and satisfied and treated with respect. So we are at the crossroads, and we can help as Muslims by moving it in one direction, in the positive direction.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show and having this discussion. And this is something that we have been saying throughout the last 4 or 5 years, is that it's our responsibility. Individual efforts make a change, and also we have to be united. We can't have our own agendas. We need to have the common good should be our focus, and we should look forward towards peace. And that is all I'm going to say, because I think Dr. Amine and Professor Akbar Ahmed have done it perfectly. And with that, we're going to now ask Sayyid Zulfikar to lead us out on a naat. But if you would like any information or any of the links that we've spoken about, log on to our Facebook fan page, which is with the name of World This Morning, our Twitter page, World This Morning without a G, our Daily Motion and YouTube page, World This Morning. The repeat is at 11:05 p.m. this evening. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you very soon.
खुशबू है दो आलम में तेरी गुले चीदा किस मुँह से बयां हो तेरे और اوصاف حمیدہ تجھ سا تجھ سا کوئی آیا ہے نہ آئے گا جہاں میں دیتا ہے گواہی یہی عالم کا جریدہ دیتا